Hello and welcome to the first episode of Quite the Rant. My name is Jon.
My name is Aaron.
And on this podcast, we will be covering certain characters and talk about the things we've seen these characters portrayed in, whether it be books, games, movies, TV shows. And we're going to go pretty in-depth and see how we feel about them and how they've been portrayed in different iterations. On this episode, we're going to be talking about Sherlock Holmes. We're going to mention the very first books he was in and the TV show portrayed by Benedict Cumberbatch, as well as the recent Sherlock Holmes movies, and even an upcoming Sherlock Holmes movie.
Well, I guess first of all, we'll go back to the books then, and we're mainly focusing on Sherlock himself, not actually John Watson or Mary or anything like that. So, let's see. The first book was... God, which one was it?
A Study in Scarlet.
Yeah, A Study in Scarlet. And most people know Sherlock Holmes by... Well, they used to know him mostly by the books by Arthur Conan Doyle. If I said his name correctly.
Good job.
Well, never say it correctly. And the character itself is portrayed as a very almost sociopathic kind of person that just isn't really interested in anyone else besides what he does in solving crimes, which, if anyone knows of Sherlock Holmes, that's quite obviously the base factor of him. He is not very friendly, he's anti-personal, but he's insanely smart, and he does whatever the hell he wants, whenever the hell he wants.
And he's an addict.
Oh yeah, and he's a drug addict, and that just never seems to change, no matter how many different reiterations he has.
Even in House, there was a big focus of House, which was a version of Sherlock.
Great one, by the way.
Very great.
But if you start looking more in depth into not only the books, but the different movies, you start to see that Sherlock Holmes is not such a simple character as a sociopath. In fact, he doesn't even qualify as a sociopath.
What does he qualify as?
He is a psychopath.
A high-functioning sociopath, as
that's what he likes to say,
yes.
But if you've seen any kind of psychology, anything, then he is not a sociopath. He's much different because he actually does care for people, even if it's in small doses and very few people.
So a real sociopath wouldn't really have those feelings towards other people. They wouldn't care as much for John Watson.
A real sociopath would not do what Sherlock Holmes does. While he is interested in the discovery of things, he still has some value of human life. As someone who's personally met sociopaths, they have no value of human life because it does not mean anything to them. The only life that matters to them is their own, and even that is varying.
So Sherlock does have empathy, even though he doesn't always outwardly show it.
What most likely Sherlock Holmes, no matter how many people are pissed off by this, what most likely he is high-functioning Asperger's. Yeah. They are born without the ability to really feel empathy or sometimes sympathy for people. And Sherlock Holmes shows a lot of that in everything that he does. He doesn't interact well with people, and that leads him to being uncomfortable, so he just doesn't do it. But since he is so smart, which is also something else that comes with Asperger's. Most people who have Asperger's or really any kind of autism that isn't like Down syndrome and super severe, they have a high level of intelligence that tends to boggle other people's minds. They don't quite think in the way that everyone else does. And Sherlock Holmes himself is exactly the same in that matter. His intelligence is so different and so strange that a lot of people just get utterly confused whenever he does anything.
So what Sherlock Holmes books have you read?
I've read all of the ones by Arthur Conan Doyle. If I'm saying his name correctly, I can never say it correctly.
The main novels and not the short stories?
I think I've only read the short stories.
Oh, okay.
But I'm one of those people, I won't actually read the books because I don't have the patience to read a book. But I will read basically anything else I can get my hands on about it because I like reading articles. And usually, if it's a story, I prefer something that's summed up instead of having to read an entirety of something, just because I tend to lose focus very easily.
I don't think I've read a book in about a year. Is that sad?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I at least read, like, different stuff online. I read stuff online.
We're always reading stuff. Everyone reads everything nowadays. Just a lot of people don't really sit down to read a book, even though it's so easy on Kindle and such.
I mean, I've probably read stuff recently that was, like, you know, book length.
Yeah.
But not actual books. But usually when I sit down and I read something that's book length, I'll finish it in 2 days. Because I won't focus on anything else but that. But it has to be, like, really catchy and it has to, like, engulf me. But this is, like, totally not what we're supposed to be talking about.
No, it's a little bit of a tangent. So what was the first thing you remember seeing the character of Sherlock Holmes in on TV or in a movie?
Oh, crap. First... I don't know. I think the first thing that I would remember is probably actually Star Trek.
Star Trek?
Yeah, there was an episode Sherlock Holmes related that I saw. That because I watched so much Star Trek when I was younger. That was all my family watched. Star Trek, Battlestar Galactica, things like that. And Star Trek was the first thing with anything Sherlock Holmes related that I did. I think it was... Oh, God. I think it was Voyager or the new one. I can't remember. It was Data.
Yeah, so Next Generation.
It was Next Generation.
Definitely a holodeck thing.
And Data was dressed like Sherlock Holmes.
I remember Moriarty being a villain in one of those episodes. He came into the ship, I think, from the holodeck.
Yeah. And that's the first thing I remember. After that was probably... See, I watched everything in such, like, disjunction or whatever, because I just... Like, I watched the Star Trek, and then later on, a few years after that, I watched Robert Downey Jr. in the Sherlock movies, and then, you know, the Sherlock TV show, and then I've seen other stuff, like little bits and pieces of things with Sherlock in it, and then The Great Mouse Detective I only watched about 2 years ago.
Only then?
Yeah, only about 2 years ago.
So I'm pretty sure the first thing I ever saw Sherlock in... probably was just some character referencing him in some cartoon. Probably had the hat on, the Sherlock outfit that's become pretty classical. But the first thing I think I saw Sherlock in was Sherlock Holmes in the 22nd Century, which was a late 90s or early 2000s animated series that I used to catch reruns on. And in this, Sherlock was encased in amber or honey, something like that, for years and years until the 22nd century, and then a descendant of Lestrade resurrected him to solve a mystery that had to do with Moriarty, and then the show picks up from there, and John Watson is a cyborg, and Sherlock is just as smooth and suave and old century as you'd imagine. He's the same character, it's just the world around him really changed. It was a fun show.
On a side note, that really reminds me of a show that I watched where, like, Batman was, like, thrown into the future, and it was like an old cartoon series.
Yeah, that's
and
Batman Beyond.
And he had like a piano or something like that. That's all I remember of it, is that there was a piano and there was Batman and he was fighting evil. That's it.
Was it a young Batman in the future?
Yes, it was a young Batman in the future. It was on Cartoon Network or something like that, and that's like, I don't remember anything of the show besides that little bit.
Yeah, that was Batman Beyond, which is pretty cool, and it's kind of like a similar thing to just throwing the same character, kind of, but in a whole new futuristic realm. It was fun.
So, what else have you seen that's not really general, like, you know, actually specifically Sherlock related that you've seen Sherlock in?
House, of course. I've seen all of House, and I didn't realize it at first that it was so based on Sherlock Holmes. I didn't understand that the connection between House, Holmes, and Watson and Wilson, I didn't get that until much later, and then it blew my mind. See,
the moment I saw, like, I started really focusing on Sherlock Holmes, I noticed the connection between them because of how House acts is just almost exactly the same, except for maybe a little bit more understanding of people's emotions, but at the same time, probably not. He's just a little bit, you know, here and there. It's almost like, in some aspects, I'd say that they took the characters and they gave them a little bit of each other and then made new characters of it. Which, I mean, just makes it that it was... If you think about it that way, then couldn't you say that House was more like an alternate universe fan fiction than an actual, you know, story? Yeah. I mean, at the same time, you could say any character that is Holmes Holmes-ish or Holmes-like. It's just if you're writing a story and you have someone who's the calmer, more, plactated half, then you're going to have something that's basically an AU of Sherlock Holmes, which is unfortunate that people would think that way because a lot of stories are originally made, but they're just different.
Does
whatever.
House seem less on the autism spectrum to you than Holmes usually is portrayed?
Yes, he does seem less so because on a factor of, while House seems to know everything he's doing and he's doing it on purpose to be a jackass, Sherlock Holmes has almost this way of doing things and reacting to people telling him it's wrong as if he doesn't understand that it's wrong. He's just been doing it for so long and it's so much part of who he is that he doesn't understand what he just did or what he just said or, the way he just reacted to his situation is wrong.
Sometimes House doesn't know how much of an asshole he's being until people remind him that he's being such an asshole.
Yeah, so I'd say he is less on the autism spectrum, but when you get to Sherlock Holmes, I would never say that he's full-blown autistic, and dirt kind of stuff, but he is high, really, really, really high-functioning Asperger's. Basically as high-functioning as you can get, but still the factor of not understanding people as a whole is there because, for one thing, he didn't have the life growing up that a lot of people now or any other time would have with the parent that would be able to tell what was going on and then teach him that he was a idiot and jackass and a little bit,
That's the benefit of our perceptions now. We can look back and maybe more clearly understand what was going on in the heads of some of these people biologically. When back then they might have just thought, oh, this guy Holmes, he's kind of a weirdo.
Or he's just eccentric.
Yeah, eccentric. That's probably what they would have used exactly.
See, when it comes to a factor of that, you've got, back then, even mentioning anything that might be possibly autistic, they didn't even know what that word was.
No.
And then also when they did find out, it was like telling someone they were less than anyone else. If you even mentioned that they could possibly be autistic. And it's you have some of the greatest minds who have been like that. And even some of the greatest written minds, like Sherlock Holmes, they have Asperger's or they have autism or something. Because it's a spectrum of something we don't quite understand. You can go on and on and on about, how it makes somebody less. But when you look at the factors of it, the people who are high functioning, which there are a lot of them, they're smarter than anyone else. Mm-hmm. And they get more done and they can think about things in more in-depth fashions than people who just have a normal functioning mind.
Do you think Benedict Cumberbatch has been the best at showing that side of Holmes?
I have to say, for me personally, on an honest level, yes. He has been the best, though Robert Downey Jr. does come in a close second. They both have a way of portraying Sherlock that just kind of brings out the good and the bad without overshadowing any of it. I've seen, old shows of Sherlock, clips and stuff like that. Just ones that really didn't last that long, weren't really all that interesting, and skits, of course. And it's just, a lot of people want to portray that he was this stunted, kind of no emotion whatsoever, almost Vulcan-esque kind of thing going on. And if you read the books and you read the short stories on him, he wasn't like that. And sure, you may have flourishes and think, well, it was somebody else writing about him. But and of course, John Watson is so out there and over the top that whatever. That's a whole different story that's going to be said another time. We'll talk about John Watson later. But it's just, if you look at the books and everything, he has emotion and he does things with emotion. And a lot of people tend to forget that when they portray him.
I think the most famous movie portrayal in the old days was a guy named Basil Rathbone. I haven't seen really any of his Sherlock films, but I don't know if they got that side of him at all. I think they just try to make him as suave as possible, as confident. as they could. They try to make him like more of a ladies' man. I don't know. That's just the perception I get from what I've seen of his portrayal of Holmes.
See, and the funniest thing about that is in the books and stuff, he wasn't a suave ladies' man. He was suave, I'll give you that. But he had no real intention to be a ladies' man. He wasn't, going like, he wasn't going to run around and go sleep with whoever. Sherlock Holmes, from my knowledge, from what I remember, he never got married.
No.
And he never had kids. None of that. So to portray him as a suave ladies' man is almost giving him, like, you're taking away who he is, because he's not that. He is insanely smart. He's a detective. He has, he has emotions, but they're not, like, in the forefront. And in order to be a ladies' man, honestly, you have to have, like, emotions that are in the forefront, because most women will be like, okay, you're suave and all this other crap, but if you don't know where to put it, then I'm not gonna sleep with you.
Do you think he's always had the potential to be in love with John Watson?
There's always been that potential, and a lot of people don't like that fact, and I understand why people don't like it, because people think that by saying that Sherlock Holmes is in any way romantically interested in John Watson, which I'm not saying that he is, and I'm not saying that he isn't, because it is very ambiguous. If you want to think that way, you can. If you don't, then you're fine. Whatever, I don't care. But a lot of people seem to think that by doing that, you're lessening who Sherlock Holmes is and, the kind of person that he is. But you're not lessening anything. It's still Sherlock Holmes, and in fact, by saying that he has the ability to have a romantic relationship with the one person that is, important to him, is not going to, it's not going to detract from anything. A lot of people don't like it because they say, well, if he's in love with someone, then you're instantly, if he's in love with John Watson, you're instantly saying that Sherlock Holmes as a person he can't have a friendship that deep with someone without being romantically involved with them. And that, relationships like that just don't exist. And that's not what anyone's saying at all. It's a fact that the way that they act and the way that they are is almost like here's the biggest thing. You can have someone who is a life partner or a soulmate without being romantically interested in them. That is completely possible. There is no such thing as if you are in love with someone and you love someone, you have to be romantically involved with them, or you have to see them in a brotherly way. And when you look at Sherlock Holmes, he does not see John Watson in a brotherly way, but there is a romantic element to all of it for Sherlock Holmes. He treats John Watson in a way he treats no one else, not even Irene Adler, who he had sort of a romantic kind of thing going on. And Sherlock Holmes does have other friends, and he still does not treat John Watson that way. And it's not it's not to say that they are gay or they're not gay, or they're gay for each other or they're not gay for each other. It's just to say that their relationship and the way that they are and who Sherlock Holmes is leads to a conception that it could be either or. And that's how he was meant to be. So it's not anything set in concrete, and not anything that, anyone needs to be upset about or start fights over, because one person sees it as they could be romantic and someone else sees it as they would never be romantic because it lessens the friendship. It doesn't lessen the friendship. You can be romantically involved with your best friend, and, that's fine. A lot of people who are married are best friends with their partner, and it's their closest friend. That doesn't mean that the sexual relationship or the romantic relationship had to happen. It just did.
Do you think in the future versions of Holmes that it should always be that open to interpretation? They shouldn't nail down his sexuality one way or the other?
I don't know. I think there'd be a good kind of difference with it if they allowed it and opened it up to going one way or the other. And I think mostly they should stick to letting it be ambiguous. It's, big thing, be ambiguous. But at the same time, if they will take the liberty to do it, there's always going to be more that's coming. If you don't like one, you'll like another. That's just how society is. We'll make one and then we'll make another at the same time because, we like different options. So to say to never do it is closing off an entire realm of possibilities for it. So while I personally wouldn't really care if yay or nay with it, I feel that a lot of other people would have the opinion that, yeah, to do it and, make sure that it's seen and everything like that. But then, you always get the other spectrum. But I think that, yes, I think it would be more interesting if they did eventually explore that avenue, but I like the ambiguous.
So I think we both grew up watching The Great Mouse Detective. It was a Disney animated film where they transferred the personalities of Sherlock Holmes and John Watson to mice. Oh, and Moriarty too. But they all had different names, so I guess not to infringe on anything, but we knew who they were.
Oh yeah. I loved that movie when I finally saw it. That was fantastic. I wondered after I saw it why it took me so long to see it, because I'd seen it on Netflix and everything like that before.
Oh, so you didn't watch it as a kid?
No, I did not watch it as a kid, but I watched it after that. I think I may have seen bits and pieces of it as a kid. I remember seeing bits and pieces of it as a kid, but I wondered after I saw it, I was like, I love Sherlock Holmes so much. I love the storyline. I love who he is as as a character and as a person. It's just, it interests me. How did it take me so long to finally see this freaking movie? And it just, I saw it and I loved it, except for the portrayal of John Watson. How so? Because in the books, John Watson is not a short, fat guy.
No, really?
He has never been a short, fat guy. He has never been portrayed in the books as short and fat. He's a soldier. You can't be a soldier if you're short and fat. I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. So it's always a little bit frustrating when I see that kind of thing, but John Watson's a different story. We won't talk about John Watson. I can go on 10 million tirades about...
On the next episode.
On the next episode.
What did you think when you first saw the trailer for Robert Downey Jr.'s Sherlock Holmes? And then what did you think when you first saw the previews for the BBC Sherlock series?
Okay, as someone who personally loves Sherlock Holmes, I'm ashamed of myself for saying this. I thought the movie was going to be stupid. And then I refused to watch Sherlock because I thought it was going to be stupid.
Both of them.
I thought both of them were going to be stupid. And the reason I thought Sherlock was going to be stupid was because I loved the Robert Downey Jr. movie so much. Because that was Sherlock in my mind. But I think I saw the 3-year gap between season 2 and 3.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, the one that drove everyone insane for the TV series. At 2 years after the first 2 seasons came out, I finally decided to watch Sherlock. And I remember because I kept telling you after I watched it, I was like, you gotta watch this. You gotta watch this. And for a year, I was telling you the exact same thing until you finally finished it. For some freaking reason, you were taking your time. And then season 3 came out, and I was kind of like, you've got to be kidding me. I waited a year for this. I feel bad for anyone who waited 2 years for this, 3 years for this. And then you're just like, oh, it came out a month later.
Yeah, I didn't have to wait long at all. And then we watched season 3 together.
Oh, yeah, it was fantastic. Sort of. Oh, I could go into stuff about that, too.
Do you think the Robert Downey Jr. movies, are those too much of an action movie for you? I know they're directed by Guy Ritchie, and he's kind of known for stuff like that.
I thought it was a new side to Sherlock that made it seem a lot more action-y that I quite enjoyed, because I like action movies. If you don't like action movies, or you're not a fan of big fight scenes or things blowing up, then don't watch it. But I like fight scenes, and I like that. I liked the action-packed kind of, things going boom and people getting shot and things like that. That was interesting to me. And I liked how you had this fighting element to Sherlock Holmes that showed that he wasn't just all brains, he was brawn as well.
Everyone really loved that boxing scene in the first movie where time just slowed down for him and he calculated his opponent's every move. I thought that was a perfect mix of his action and brawler side with his smarts.
I love those scenes in those movies because there was another one in the second one, and I liked how they were not overused. It wasn't every single fight scene was that way. It's just, it showed you that this is how he's thinking while he's fighting. So you know, and you're not left with, you know, how did he figure all of that out? Is he just super? And it's like, no, he's got thoughts in his head that he's working through.
After seeing as much of Sherlock as we have, do you think there's still room for more modern versions of Sherlock? I haven't seen Elementary.
Don't
watch Elementary?
Get
okay.
me started on Elementary. Don't even. Because even that Sherlock is not even really Sherlock. He's an okay Sherlock Holmes. People seem to want to play him up and talk him up and things like that. But I've seen it, and he's an okay Sherlock Holmes. He's an okay American Sherlock Holmes, because that's what he is. And it just... There's stuff about him that suggests it's less Sherlock Holmes-ish than it should be. And then, of course, what they did to John Watson, which just did...
So Watson should probably never be a woman, in your opinion.
Watson should never be a woman, because if people are pissed off about Sherlock being in a romantic relationship with Watson as a man, they have no right to ask for it as a woman.
Would a female Sherlock work? Kind of like how we kind of want a doctor to be a female at some point.
In a fashion, I would think that the female Sherlock would work, but I personally, I wouldn't really enjoy something like that, just because Sherlock Holmes is Sherlock Holmes. I'd rather the characters all stay the characters instead of them being switched around and changed. But, I mean, I guess as long as John Watson was a woman as well.
Yeah,
because
that'd be interesting. We haven't seen that ever.
If they just gender swapped it like that, I wouldn't have a problem. But there is such a stigma in our society and as, you know, in Hollywood and things like that.
For too close males?
Not for too close males, but for a man and a woman, they cannot be friends, just friends.
There's always going to be sexual tension.
No one will ever see the show Elementary as just them being friends. I mean, There are people who can see past that, but the large majority of people are just waiting for Sherlock to bone John.
Was there some sexual tension in Elementary?
Yes. There's a shit ton. It is, like, abound. Especially, it doesn't help that the actor and the actress have natural chemistry, which you need when you're playing Sherlock and John, or whatever, her Joan, or whatever they decided to name her. But it's just, you can't, to have two separate, to have the separate genders just throws in all kinds of factors that weren't in the original storyline, and then just kind of, I'm sorry, I'm still of the opinion that if you can't handle a close relationship like that between two people of the same gender, you're not allowed to change one's gender and then just write it off. It's not right, because you're instantly changing the story to a point that I don't think is okay.
So we just watched the trailer for the upcoming movie Mr. Holmes, starring Ian McKellen as Sherlock. What did you think of it?
I thought that is going to be fantastic. I like it, and I'm a little bit disappointed that John Watson really isn't in the trailer.
I don't think we saw any John Watson. The actor who's playing him is named Colin Starkey, but we haven't really seen him in anything, and it's kind of hard to find a real picture of the guy, so he's presumably not going to be a very big part at all of Mr. Holmes. They seem kind of estranged, as I think I got the sense from the trailer that Watson just wrote all this stuff about Sherlock down, and then that material got used to make Sherlock movies in this universe. We saw a scene where Sherlock was watching himself portrayed in a black and white movie, which was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think the movie's going to be interesting, and I like how you can kind of get the sense from it that everything with Sherlock was kind of like played up. He's not really that kind of person. He's good at what he does, and he is like really good at what he does, but it was all sort of just over exaggerated by John Watson.
Yeah, they mentioned that Watson embellished in his writings of Sherlock.
Yeah, he embellished quite a bit. And I think that's it's going to be interesting and it's going to be good. Plus, I like the little kid in it. He's adorable.
Yeah, the kid's cute. He has chemistry with Ian McKellen already.
Yeah, it's adorable. I think it's going to be a good movie. I mean, all it comes down to, though, is what happens when you actually go see it. There's been plenty of trailers that, you know, you go and you see them and you're like, that movie's going to be fantastic. Then you go see the movie and you want to gouge your eyes out. Aragon, for example. Oh, boy.
So I think we'll talk more about Mr. Holmes. We'll mention it somewhere. Maybe it'll be a bonus episode. But after we see it, we'll definitely come back and...
Yeah, we'll definitely come back to it and share what we thought about it. I want to touch upon the character's relationship with his brother, Mycroft Holmes. Because that's something that, until the most recent series of the BBC Sherlock, you haven't really seen that. You get a little bit of bits and pieces of it when you're reading the books and things, but you don't really get to touch upon most of Sherlock Holmes' life and his relationship with not only his brother, but his other brother. And you don't really get to know that he had, like, it's so briefly mentioned when you're, like, looking up anything about Sherlock Holmes or you're reading the books that he has another brother. And
I don't remember
he's part
hearing
of it.
anything about another brother in the Sherlock BBC series.
Yeah, it was, there's a scene in, I think it was the last episode of the third season, and this is a spoiler. It's a spoiler. If you guys haven't seen it yet, then you know what? Sorry to be you, but here's a spoiler. Basically, after Sherlock Holmes kills Magnuson, and then he's being sent away, Mycroft is talking to some officials, and he says, he mentions that, you know, he's already had to put one brother in prison.
Oh, I missed that. I missed that entirely.
Yeah. He mentions that he's already had to put one brother in prison, and of course Moriarty comes back, but...
His parents were really funny, I thought, in that show.
Yeah, that was, like, it's nice to see, like, have a side where you can see Sherlock's family, because in the books and everything else, like, most of the time you don't see anyone besides Sherlock when it comes to, you know, his family. But you have to remember, he was raised by someone, he had a brother, and, you know, they have a relationship, and besides the fact that they seem like they hate each other, you know very well that Sherlock still cares about his brother.
They love each other.
They love each other in the way that only a Holmes can love their family. That's just how as simple as it is. And I like being able to see that kind of relationship because you don't get to see it anywhere else. And it's clearly like this kind of give and take thing. They get angry at each other, and Sherlock clearly has some repressed crap that is just like he's pissed.
The dog.
And he mentions it. It's not only the dog, it's the fact that Mycroft left him as a kid alone to deal with everything, to go to a boarding school. So you learn all of this stuff in this series, and you get to know more about, you know, not just who Sherlock Holmes is, but who Mycroft Holmes is. And it's a lot, it's like opening doors to characters that you've never really seen before. And you also get to see in the BBC Sherlock how far Sherlock will go for John Watson, to the point of lying to him. And even though John Watson knows he's lying, John Watson will also go to the point of believing it. So you get to see, that's probably one of the reasons why so many people think they're gay for each other, honestly, is because they will go so far for each other. But at the same time, you can have relationships like that without being romantically or sexually involved. And so I believe it's completely possible for them to be together forever without being in a romantic relationship, or either of them being in romantic relationships with other people, just, you know, being friends with each other forever. That's just what I can see happening. Well, okay, the movie for Robert Downey Jr., one of the things that always perplexed me a little bit, and you didn't really get to see it with the series, the TV series, is the emotional turmoil that Sherlock Holmes goes through once Watson is being basically taken away by his wife. Because, for one thing, Sherlock Holmes knows that she's a lying bitch. And for another thing, sorry, that was a little bit inappropriate, but I don't like that character at all. You can tell that he knows when John Watson gets married, that's going to be basically be the end of everything that he's done. So that's going to be almost like it's the end of Sherlock Holmes in his mind. It's almost like he thinks that's the end of himself. At least the person he became with John Watson around. And you can see that more clearly, honestly, in the Robert Downey Jr. movie than you can in the TV series, but only to the point where Robert Downey Jr. seemed to portray it more, and the script was written to kind of like show it off, while the TV series is more portraying it like he's internalizing all of it when it comes to the wedding speech, and it comes to all the things he does after that, and everything that happens when he, spoilers alert, gets shot, and just all of that. There's just this sense that almost like he's saying, I'm no longer me. And it's a character thing that basically on a technical level, we don't know Sherlock Holmes without John Watson. So it is quite plausible that maybe Sherlock Holmes doesn't quite know himself without John Watson, because they've become so ingrained into each other. Even when Sherlock Holmes was gone and he died in the TV series, he was still, in a sense, doing everything that he was doing to take down Moriarty so that John Watson would be safe. And, of course, Molly and the others. But largely, John, seeing as he's the first person Sherlock thought of when Moriarty said that he was going to shoot people. So, I mean, it's just kind of a factor of when you look into the TV series and everything like that, you get to see those sides of Sherlock Holmes. And it's something a lot of people don't focus on. We don't think, oh, hey, well, how is this character feeling? And why is this character feeling this way? And it's something that, you know, you gotta think about and you gotta remember. And it's like, you know, something that I think about a lot because I like to go so crazy in depth into characters that it's insane. But, you know, I mean, what did you think about the whole fact that, you know, how do you think Sherlock felt, like, as a character-wise? How do you think he felt when John Watson did get married?
I think he felt a little betrayed and definitely afraid for the lifestyle that he had with John. Yeah, I just think that really inside it kind of terrified him because he knows he's semi-dependent on John, and whenever any source of anyone you depend on is just seemingly taken away by someone else, that's really can be traumatizing.
Yeah. I can see that. I think also there was a sense of, I honestly, he did not like Mary because she was taking him away. I mean, he had every right because also he's really smart. He knew she was lying. There was also probably an element of fear for John because while Sherlock will never portray fear in a general sense, he still, you know, he feared for John because Mary was a liar. And that he didn't know exactly who she was, but he was getting hints that she wasn't who she said she was. So Sherlock was afraid for John getting into this relationship with someone who was potentially so dangerous. And he says so later on that, you know, John Watson is attracted to danger. And he is. He's attracted to danger. It comes to him like a magnet. The character himself has so many different levels that a lot of people don't think about with, you know, just how he treats people and how he thinks about other people. And, you know, I guess it's just something that's new in a sense that a lot of people don't want to, like, think about or take into consideration when they think about Sherlock Holmes. They just want to see him as that suave, you know, debonair, kind of a ladies' man, old style, and, you know, even, like, people who read the books, the people who read the books that I've talked to love the Sherlock series. They think it's a great, portrayal of, you know, Sherlock Holmes, and I have to agree, because it's my favorite show, one of my favorite shows. Well, I guess that's gonna be it for now. wasn't that long of a rant, thankfully. I mean, we don't really have much else to say about it. Stay looking up for the Mr. Holmes movie. Looks like it's going to be really good. It also has Ian McKellen in it, and that's fantastic. You know,
fantastic.
He's played so much. So, yeah, we'll probably come back to this at another time after the movie comes out and we've seen it. So be prepared. Prepare yourself, because Sherlock Holmes will be coming back. But for now, thank you guys for joining us.
That's what I was going to say. That's exactly what I was going to say. Thank you for joining us.
And we'll talk to you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.